everybody, it's Sarah, and before I get started, I'm sorry if you hear noise from the outside. Currently it is unbearably hot in Vienna, and so I had to keep my windows open, otherwise I'm literally going to die because I hate heat. I cannot stand it. It's the worst thing ever. I'm a winter person. Give me the winter again. But that out of the way, today's video is kind of unscheduled. And that is because it's just a very quick announcement. And that announcement is that I am starting a book club focused around reading adult high fantasy written by women. First, let's talk a little bit about the inspiration that I had behind this book club. I have already talked at length on my channel about how I got started with adult high fantasy pretty early. I think it was around 11 or 12. And I have also talked about how the first book that I ever read in high fantasy was Eragon by Christopher Paolini, but that after that I pretty much only read adult high fantasy written by women until I was like about 17, 18, so a good chunk of my reading years. The authors that made me fall in love with high fantasy were authors like Anne Bishop and Jennifer Fallon. And I do realize that that is pretty uncommon because adult high fantasy is seen as this very white male space. And I don't think that that is fair because, for example, I don't think that you will find many avid adult high fantasy readers who don't have at least one book by Robin Hobb on their shelves. And also, even more recently, you have authors like R.F. Kuang and N.K. Jemisin who make us realize that high fantasy, adult high fantasy, isn't even just not a male space, it's also not a white space. And that high fantasy, adult high fantasy, by far isn't as, and this might not be the right word choice, but I cannot think of another word at the moment, but it's not as monochrome, it's not as like monotone as we often picture it in our minds. However, while in the first 7 years or so of my adult high fantasy reading experience, I did unconsciously only pick up adult high fantasy written by women, that hasn't really been the case in the past few years, especially since I started BookTube. The amount of adult high fantasy books written by women that I have picked up has shrunk considerably and has mostly just been rereads, which I am ashamed to admit because I do not like that. Of course, part of the reason why my adult high fantasy reading has been so overly male is because I did try to read a bunch of the staple series like the Wheel of Time series, like the Witcher series, and so on. But I still want to change that, and I still want to go back to my reading roots, so to speak. And I thought a great way to motivate me to change those reading habits is to start a book club. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of thought at the beginning that who am I to start a book club? Like, is anyone even really gonna join? But I got a bunch of encouragement on Twitter, and so I decided to create this book club, which name I still haven't mentioned. The name of this book club is Of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. And a big thank you to Bia from Lorien Forest, who created kind of the book club art, the book club headings and the icons, which I never would have known how to do, so big thank you to her. So what are the goals of this book club going to be? The goals are going to be to read one book a month, to buddy read one book a month, and I know that high fantasy can be quite chunky sometimes, so maybe like every now and again we'll take 2 months for a book. These books, of course, are supposed to be high fantasy written by women, although here I have 2 caveats. The first one of those is that my main goal for this book club is to kind of show that high fantasy, that adult high fantasy, isn't a men's space. And so it might be that we'll pick up books by non-binary authors as well. And I want to make it very clear that this is not because I think you can kind of put women and non-binary people in one pot, but because, as I said, my goal for this book club really is to get away from kind of this imagination that adult high fantasy is written by men. And then the second caveat kind of belongs to the high part of high fantasy. And that is that I'll sometimes not take it as seriously, but maybe also read books from other subgenres within the fantasy genre. The reason for that is that I do want to get a good balance between white authors that will read as well as BIPOC authors. And in my kind of preliminary research, I have noticed that especially for BIPOC authors, it was quite hard, especially when it came to Latinx authors, to find books that are specifically high fantasy and not some other subgenre. So there might be times when a book doesn't necessarily 100% belong into the high fantasy genre. The way we're going to choose books is that every month for the next month I am going to choose 4 books that I will then put in a poll, probably on the book club Twitter, and then you as the community, if you decide to join this book club, can choose which book you'd like to read most. And I think it's a good idea to make the choice around the middle of the month, so that way you still have time until we get started with the buddy read to actually get the book, if you have to order it, if you have to get it from the library, and so on. There's also gonna be discussion threads on Goodreads, as well as a Discord to maybe get to know each other better and also to discuss the books. And both of those will be linked down below, as well as the Twitter, of course. And thank you to Lena from Sufficiently Advanced Lena for creating the Discord. Again, I once again proved my incapability of dealing with modern media, basically, and like the digital world. And then also, I don't remember if I said it already or not, we're also hopefully going to have live shows and discussions at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month, but that also kind of depends on whether or not I can figure out how live shows work on YouTube. And now the only thing that's left to say is that officially the book club will start in September, so the poll for the September book will probably be up in like 1.5 to 2 weeks or so. However, we still already have a buddy read in August if you want to join us there, and that is The Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. Harris. This is a reread for me, and it's also, again, technically not high fantasy. However, it is a retelling of Norse mythology from the point of view of Loki, and so I kind of thought it would be fitting as a kind of interim book until we officially start the book club, because Valkyries, of course, are from Norse mythology. Of course, right before I was about to finish this video, my storage is full. Anyway, where was I? Right. You're also welcome, if there are any particular books you want to read, to send them into the recommendations thread on Goodreads, or also into my DMs on Twitter, or to send them into the Discord and all that thing. And again, all the links down in the description box. My personal social media are also in the description box, so go and check those out. If you're gonna join this book club, tell me in the comments down below, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!